Whispers of the Ancient Stars. By Alton Gar. William's fingers twitched, driven by a restless urge for violence as he surveyed the alien market. The thick-scaled Jedarians moved with an eerie grace, their tentacles braided into complex knots that made them blend into the crowd. He felt exposed without a weapon, his discomfort made worse by the scarf covering his face. The scarf was necessary to hide the translators' lack of synchronization with their mouths. It also marked them as Turanites, a minority religious group known for their distinctive head coverings. They were here on a mission to find the crash site of a Lutian ship, an ancient alien civilization whose technology could fetch a fortune on the black market. But if the Jedarians discovered their true identity or learned that life existed on other planets, the consequences would be catastrophic, and it wouldn't be good for the Jedarian either. Rachel had insisted he couldn't bring a weapon since it was against the custom of this place, arguing that being caught with a weapon would be more dangerous than not having one. William thought she was naive, underestimating the value of being armed.
This place feels like a powder keg,
he muttered under his breath, scanning for any hint of threat. The tension in the air felt thick and stifling. As he spoke, one of the alien children ran by chasing another who was laughing. Rachel didn't bother to hide her exasperation.
Do you ever stop whining? We're not here to play hero.
William's jaw tightened.
Better to have a weapon and not need it than need one and be dead.
Keep your voice down.
Rachel hissed, eyes darting around.
You want them to know we're outsiders.
If it keeps us alive, I don't care.
William shot back. The market was a chaotic maze of stalls, each one filled with strange goods that spoke of a world barely out of its industrial infancy. Rachel had done her homework on their customs, but her knowledge often clashed with her abrasive approach. William resented her for it, feeling more like he was with a brilliant child than a partner. Without warning, Rachel grabbed his wrist and yanked him towards a stall. William jerked his hand free.
What the hell, Rachel?
Follow my lead.
She snapped, her eyes blazing with irritation.
You might learn something.
They stopped at a stall where an elderly Jedarian woman was tending to a variety of intricate trinkets. Rachel didn't waste any time with pleasantries.
We need a place to stay. No, anywhere.
Her voice was brusque and impatient. The woman's tentacles twitched slightly, but she offered a warm smile.
Travelers are always welcome. There's an inn just down the road. Tell them Meryl sent you, and they'll treat you well.
William stepped forward, attempting to mask Rachel's rudeness.
We can trade skills for a room. I'm good with repairs, she's useful in her own way.
He forced a smile, hoping to soften Rachel's bluntness. Rachel shot him a look that could cut glass, but he ignored it. The old woman's smile didn't waver.
No need for that. Or is it different where you come from?
William hesitated, choosing his words carefully.
Things are different. People usually have to pay up front.
On Earth, you'd not only pay ahead, but have to have proof you could pay for any damages as well, and even then they sometimes decided against letting you stay for entirely arbitrary reasons. The old woman nodded.
Here, if people need a place to stay, they pay what they can. If that puts a strain on the innkeeper, the local government helps with the costs.
William managed a tight smile.
Thank you for your kindness.
But as he began to walk, he watched even more carefully. This had to be some type of a trick. The inn was a cozy building, far more welcoming than William had expected. The innkeeper, a burly Jedarian with a kind demeanor, greeted them warmly. The warmth of the place contrasted sharply with William's anxiety, though even on human worlds, people in hotels at least tried to pretend to be friendly.
Meryl sent us.
Rachel said bluntly.
We need a room.
Her tone devoid of any softness or awareness that they were effectively asking for charity. The innkeeper nodded.
Of course. You're welcome here. We have a room ready. Follow me.
He led them up a narrow staircase without any mention of cost. Inside their room, William immediately began inspecting the place, looking for any signs of danger or surveillance, But the limited technology of this world made it all but impossible that anyone could spy on them unless they were looking through a hole in the wall. While he checked for that, Rachel unpacked their gear and began to put together the pieces of the scanner they had brought. If they could bring that, then why not a weapon, he thought. After setting the scanner to automatic scan, Rachel wandered back downstairs, where the innkeeper and a few locals were preparing for the evening meal. Despite her rough exterior, she offered to help, though her blunt manner didn't endear her to anyone. The evening brought a communal meal, and they were invited to join. William eyed the food suspiciously, but knew they couldn't afford to refuse, though eating it all without removing their ceremonial scarves would be tricky. But Rachel, to his surprise, managed to rearrange her scarf in a way that allowed her to eat without fully revealing her face. He followed her lead, albeit grudgingly. As the food was served, the old woman who had sent them to the inn addressed the gathering.
In honor of our Turanite guests, we have prepared the meal according to Turanite traditions. We used no imtini and included willen bread for everyone. Please eat that last, as is the custom.
As she said that, one of the children put the bread back with a bite taken out of it. The meal was filled with laughter and stories. The Jedarians were a tight-knit community. William and Rachel kept mostly to themselves, trying to limit their interactions as much as possible to avoid any mistakes. After the meal, the innkeeper approached them with a gentle smile.
I hope you found the meal to your liking. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask.
William nodded curtly.
We're fine. Just need to rest.
His voice was gruff, masking his unease as he still expected that there was some hidden cost to the room. Back in their room, Rachel checked their equipment with methodical precision. William glanced out the window, the market now quiet and empty. William's fingers drummed impatiently against the scanner, the frustration palpable in his every movement. The device had been useless all night. Rachel, focused and unyielding, continued to recheck her calculations, her eyes scanning her notes rather than the device. Her determination was unwavering.
No signal, no sign of anything.
William growled.
We've been at this for hours.
His patience was wearing thin. Rachel didn't look up, her focus unwavering.
Patience. The calculations are sound. We just need to follow them. A signal just would have made it more certain.
Her calm demeanor only aggravated him more. He sighed, glancing out the window. The market was beginning to stir, Jedarians moving gracefully through the streets, their tentacles flowing like water. There was something dangerous hidden behind their calm demeanor. He just hadn't figured out what it was yet.
I still don't see how a 200-mile radius helps us.
William muttered, his eyes narrowing.
We can't comb every inch of this area.
It's not equally likely that it crashed in any specific spot.
Rachel replied.
There are geographical features that can narrow it down. Mountains, valleys, places that have remained unchanged for millennia.
Right, because searching an entire region based on old geography is better than nothing.
William said, sarcasm dripping from his words. Rachel shot him a look that could cut glass.
It's what we've got. Now move. We need to start in the areas most likely to have preserved the wreckage.
Her frustration at the lack of signal showing through her attempt to remain calm. They ventured into the dense ancient forest, far from any populated areas. The sounds of alien wildlife created an eerie backdrop. Rachel led the way, consulting her maps and notes, while William scanned their surroundings for any signs of danger, as he had done every day they had searched. Forests were a great place for an ambush. Hours passed, their search methodical and slow. Just as William was about to suggest they turn back for another day, Rachel stopped abruptly.
Here,
She said, pointing to a solid rock face.
Are you sure?
William asked. Rachel nodded, tapping a series of coordinates into her handheld device.
this has to be it. Help me clear these rocks.
They began to carefully remove the layers of vegetation and debris. As they worked, they discovered a small, cleverly concealed cave entrance that had been completely hidden by centuries of overgrowth and natural camouflage.
This is it.
Rachel breathed, a mix of relief and excitement washing over her. William nodded, his tension easing slightly.
Let's get inside.
They carefully pried open the hidden entrance, revealing a narrow passageway that led underground. As they stepped inside, the air was thick with the scent of age and disuse. The interior was pitch dark, save for the beams of their flashlights cutting through the gloom. Rachel took the lead, her flashlight illuminating the way.
Stay close and be careful. We don't know what kind of defenses this thing has.
As they ventured deeper into the ship, the tension was palpable. The walls were lined with strange alien symbols that glowed faintly under their lights. The symbols were both fascinating and an unsettling reminder of the long-dead alien civilization.
They must have some way to dampen signals, or we would have picked this up on the scan,
William said.
Yes. It's called rock.
Rachel said. Her sarcasm was biting. Suddenly, a sharp mechanical noise echoed through the corridors.
Did you hear that?
William whispered, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he didn't have. Rachel nodded, her eyes narrowing.
Stay alert.
Without warning, a series of lights flickered on, and the corridor was bathed in a harsh, artificial glow. Panels on the walls slid open, revealing dormant security drones that began to activate. They were small spheres that had a single circle that marred the otherwise perfect metal. Those circles glowed a menacing red.
Move.
Rachel shouted, pulling William behind a bulkhead just as the drones started to fire. Energy blasts scorched the walls where they had stood moments before.
We're not getting in there on our own,
Rachel said, and William couldn't disagree. If he had a weapon, he might be able to shoot down the drones eventually, but they still had power after almost 2,000 years, so that was by no means certain.
I'll get the Jedarians. They seem willing to help, and so long as those drones kill all of them, it won't contaminate their culture,
William said, trying to convince himself as much as Rachel that using the Jedarians wouldn't just be murder. But he had killed plenty of people before. You did what you needed to survive, and today he needed to get into that ship.
Do what you think is necessary,
Rachel said, and sat down on the rocky ground of the cave a few feet from the area that had triggered the drones. It was dangerous for her to stay, but William was annoyed enough at this point he almost hoped she was shot. It would make this whole trip easier, and he'd come out with twice as much money. Even alone, it took almost 3 hours to make it back to the market where the only people he knew were. He found the elderly Jedarian woman who had helped them earlier, Meryl.
We need your help,
He said, breathless.
There's something dangerous in the cave we were praying in.
Careful not to say anything to her that might suggest that it was a ship, and certainly not that it was alien. After a short discussion and explanation that they desperately needed to get what was in that cave, and adding in some religious reasons for them to go there at all, the Jedarians agreed to help and traveled with William to the cave. Once at the cave, the Jedarians were frightened only for a moment by the drones. Then one of them said a word that came through at first in their odd lilting language, and then translated to demon. That wasn't good, but it hardly mattered as the dozen young men rushed in to kill the strange metal creatures. Rachel and William rushed into the room behind them. William still didn't have a weapon, so he stayed back, but Rachel had to get to the control panel. That meant moving past the fight that the Jedarians were quickly losing, and as soon as she did, Rachel became the main target. A drone turned towards Rachel, the glow becoming brighter, and one of the young Jedarians bravely threw himself in front of Rachel just as the beam of energy fired. The drone's energy blast hit him, sending him sprawling to the ground, but it gave Rachel the opening she needed. The locals used whatever they had, sticks, rocks, their own bodies, to draw the drone's fire. Despite their pre-industrial state and lack of advanced weaponry, their sheer determination was impressive, especially since the drone's shields kept them protected from every attack. No wonder this place had stayed hidden. Rachel's fingers flew over the alien interface, desperately trying to make sense of the controls. The Jedarians continued to hold off the drones, their bravery and selflessness evident as they fell one by one. Finally, with one last keystroke, the drones powered down, their lights dimming to black. The silence that followed was deafening, until one of the Jedarians said,
Their ritual has banished the demons.
William rushed to Rachel's side, his eyes wide with a mix of gratitude and confusion. He had fought alongside humans for years, and they had almost all been better soldiers, but none of them had fought as hard or risked their lives for others with so little question. It was as if the people in the society trusted each other so fully that they didn't need to question the motives of someone who asked for their help. Rachel, still catching her breath, looked at the young Jedarian who had been hit to protect her.
Thank you,
She said softly, her voice laced with genuine gratitude. Her eyes softened, showing rare emotion instead of looking at them like they were a math equation to be solved. The Jedarian nodded weakly, his face pale but determined.
We protect our guests. It's our way.
William and Rachel exchanged a glance, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on their minds. They had planned to leave no witnesses, to avoid any cultural contamination. But now, seeing the genuine kindness and bravery of the Jedarians, it felt wrong. They continued deeper into the ship, leaving the injured Jedarians to their own devices. Perhaps they'd be lucky and they wouldn't survive. But for now, it wasn't a decision they had to make. Wary of any further defenses, they moved slowly. The corridors seemed endless, but eventually they reached a large chamber that housed the ship's core. The room was filled with strange machinery.
There it is,
Rachel said, her voice filled with a mix of triumph and relief.
This is going to make us rich.
William said, but he didn't feel as good about it as he had a few hours ago.
What about the loose ends? You heard them when we left. They were talking about demons and me banishing them. Those aren't part of their religion,
Rachel said.
We'll convince them it needs to stay a secret. They're gullible enough to show up here to help us, they'll believe that too.
William said. His voice lacked conviction.
I don't think you believe that. You've been looking for an explanation for how they act the entire time we've been here. Trying to figure out why they're helping, and how we can survive without money, but you've been ignoring the evidence that's right in front of you.
Rachel said.
What is that?
That they're actually good people who have designed a society that cares more about people than about money or things. That they don't feel the need to take everything they can from others because they know that there is help if they need it.
They're a primitive society. They don't even have mass communications, and you think that they've created a utopia?
It's not a utopia. It's just better than anything humans have done. But we could choose to organize our society any way we wanted, including choosing to help people, and being able to trust that others will do the same for us if we need it.
Rachel said. She had never seemed to be idealistic to William, but she was a scientist and followed the evidence. They continued to consider it, to consider a world where people focused on cooperation rather than competition, where it was more prized to help other people than to prove you were better than them. By the time they reached the cave where the others were waiting, William had made a decision. There were only 6 of the Jedarians, and 2 were unlikely to make it, and even if they did, they would be permanently injured. But instead of leaving them to their fate, William took out one of the only pieces of tech they had brought. A small first aid kit. As he bound the wounds of one of the Jedarians, he said,
We're not supposed to get involved, and we're certainly not supposed to let you know that we're not from this world. But I think I can trust you.
He injected a painkiller into one of the Jedarians, and said,
Because my people believe that it's better for all of your people to not know about us yet. And I think you'll do what's best for your people.
There were many questions. Some about the strange flying creatures that had attacked them, some about Rachel and William. William answered them all, though he wasn't specific on many, and as he did he used what technology he had to heal the men. The first aid kit wasn't impressive by human standards, but it was 2 centuries ahead of anything that the Jedarians had, and aside from one of them having lost a finger, they would be fine in a few days.
Is there anything else we can do to help you?
One of the Jedarians asked.
Advance quickly and join the consortium. Perhaps you can rub off on everyone else too.
William said, and he hoisted the backpack. It was time to get off this planet and back to a civilized world. Author's note.
I have been as guilty as anyone of conflating technology and societal advancement. I think it is reasonable in some ways. Both technology and the moral arc of the universe have been tilting upward for a long while, and there certainly have been technologies that are a moral victory. The curing of diseases and other medical advances are clear, but so is the creation of dwarf wheat. Look it up. I see great value in understanding the universe through science, and the many tools that have advanced that, and the advances in renewable energy, are going to help everyone. But it's not our technology that is holding us back from having a better world. We aren't cursed to live in a world with authoritarians and hungry children just because the technology hasn't advanced enough. People who live in places where food is available go hungry every day, and in a world that creates more food than it needs, there are places where there isn't enough. It's a moral failing of the world that has very little to do with technology. And since it seems clear to me that our technology has advanced more quickly than the morality of our culture, I wanted to explore a world where the opposite had happened. There is a lot more room for that exploration. I feel like I just dipped my toe into Jedarian society. A world where countries don't feel the need to compete, where people trust that the money they give to the government will be used for good rather than war. It's a nice place to visit, and I hope that I'll get to live someplace similar someday. But until then, all there is to do is try to make the world that exists better. If you enjoyed this story, I write new ones every week. You can keep updated by joining my newsletter at sci-fi.com or get access to over 30 patron-exclusive stories and vote for what I write next at patreon.com/Elton. Thank you. Elton Gar.